I'm back in Charlotte after 18 months in Qatar. I'd made this long journey, 16 hours in the air plus layovers in Frankfurt. Honestly, I was exhausted. But after all that time away, I was finally home and everything was supposed to be normal, right? My sister Sylvia picked me up from Charlotte Douglas, and when I got in the car, I knew something was off. She had that look, the one that says there's something you need to hear, but it's not good news. She waited until we were driving down I-85 before she dropped it. "Something's been built on your driveway," she said, just like that, like it was no big deal. I looked at her, not sure I was hearing it right. "On it?" I asked. "Not near it." "On it," she replied. I couldn't believe it. She had to be joking. But when I turned onto my street, I saw it. A steel frame shed sitting right in the middle of my private driveway easement. I couldn't even believe what I was seeing. The concrete pad it was sitting on covered the full width of my easement. The shed itself was 12 feet wide, 16 feet deep, with a generator inside, one of those huge 150 kilowatt commercial ones. And I could see the nameplate on it right there on the front: Crestwood Ridge Community Association Emergency Power Infrastructure Phase 1, installed November 2024. This was no accident. They had built it on my land without asking me, without my permission, and without a single permit. It was a violation of everything I stood for. And what made it worse, the HOA had put their name on it like they had every right to do it. I spent 20 years as an infrastructure engineer. I've worked on major projects all over the world, building systems that can kill people if they're not done right. And I could tell right away that this installation was wrong, horribly wrong. I took photos of everything: the shed, the concrete pad, the gas line, the electrical conduit zip-tied to my exterior wall. None of it was up to code. The concrete had even been poured over my easement boundary marker. There were no building permits, no gas permits, no electrical permits, nothing. I couldn't just let this go. I called my attorney right away asking for help. I needed to know how this could happen. I'd been overseas working hard for 18 months, and now I was coming back to find that my own land had been violated in broad daylight. I felt a mix of disbelief and anger, but most of all, I was determined to get answers. I wasn't going to let the HOA walk all over me. The next day, I called Diane Puit, the president of the HOA. Over the years, I'd only interacted with the HOA 3 times. But this was a whole other level. Diane answered right away, and I got straight to the point. "There's a permanent structure on my private driveway easement. I need you to explain how it got there." Her response was cold, almost rehearsed. She explained that the HOA had identified the need for a backup generator after the community had lost power during an ice storm. And guess what? My property, the one I owned, was the perfect location for the installation. She said they'd tried to contact me twice, by email, but I hadn't responded. I was overseas. Of course I hadn't responded. How could I? I asked her for the permits. "When was the building permit pulled?" I demanded. She paused, and then it got worse. "The contractor managed the permitting process. That wasn't good enough for me. I want the date the permit was pulled." "When was it issued?" I pressed. There was silence on the other end. "I'll check the project documentation," she said. I didn't trust her. I'd worked in construction too long to fall for excuses like that. I knew exactly what was going on. The HOA had acted without any regard for my rights, and now they were trying to cover it up. I hung up the phone, and that's when I decided I would take action. I spent the next few hours documenting everything. Every single angle. The concrete pad, the boundary marker buried under it, the electrical wiring that wasn't up to code. I was meticulous. I took 94 photos, all time-stamped and geotagged. I documented every violation. I wasn't going to leave anything to chance. I wanted the whole thing on record, ready for when the HOA tried to weasel their way out of it. Then I called Priya Nair, a property lawyer in Charlotte. I'd worked with her before. She was sharp, and I needed someone who knew the law to back me up. I told her everything: the shed, the generator, the permits that didn't exist. She listened quietly, then told me, "I'll get to work on this right away. Send me the photos." She knew, just like I did, that this was no small mistake. The HOA had to answer for this. Priya got to work. She pulled the permit records from Cabarrus County. I waited. It didn't take long. The results were exactly what I had expected. There were no permits, nothing in the system, no building permit, no electrical permit, no gas permit, nothing. The HOA had ignored every rule. They had built this structure on my land without my consent, without a single permit, and now they had to be held accountable. The HOA had made a grave mistake. They thought they could do whatever they wanted, but now I was going to make sure they paid the price. I didn't just want the shed removed. I wanted them to face the legal consequences for their actions. I filed a formal demand for the removal of the shed, the generator, and everything else they had put on my land. I wasn't going to let them off the hook. The HOA didn't respond right away, so I moved forward with my plan. Priya filed legal notices, and I followed up with the county. Things were heating up. They couldn't ignore me forever. Then came the county's response. The official notice of violation. They had 30 days to remove the shed or face further action. The HOA was caught in their own lies. The removal had to happen. And when the crane showed up to do the work, they needed my permission to access my land. The kicker. The crane couldn't get through the entrance of the development. They would have to cross my property to get the shed out. When Diane showed up at my door asking for permission, I knew it was coming. I'd already prepared myself. I wasn't going to make it easy for her. But I wasn't going to be unreasonable either. I agreed to let them use my property, but only if they signed an agreement, a legal document. Priya had already drawn it up. I wasn't going to let them get away with anything. Diane and her lawyer came to my lawyer's office to sign the agreement. The document was clear. It outlined the terms, the damages, and the responsibilities. Diane and the HOA had to acknowledge that they had built the shed on my property without permission. It was a legal acknowledgement. They had to pay for the damages they caused. I wasn't going to let them off the hook. The removal happened a few days later. It wasn't pretty. The crane had trouble getting in, and the removal process was slow. But in the end, the shed was gone. The generator was gone. The concrete pad was gone. But the fight wasn't over. I filed a civil lawsuit to recover the damages for the violations. I wanted my property restored, the damage paid for, and compensation for the inconvenience. And that's when things got serious. The HOA's insurance carrier refused to cover the damages. They were denied because they had acted outside the scope of their authority. Diane had made a mess, and now the HOA had to clean it up. The lawsuit was only the beginning. I won the damages I requested. My property was restored, and the HOA paid for the damages they caused. But it didn't end there. The HOA had to answer for their actions. Diane, the president, had made a mistake, and the whole HOA had to pay for it. The community learned a valuable lesson. When someone oversteps, when they think they can do whatever they want, there are consequences. Diane had been the one to make the decision, but the entire board was responsible for it. In the end, I got justice. The HOA had to pay, and I got my property back. It's a reminder, don't let anyone take what's yours. Stand up for your rights. And when people try to walk all over you, make sure they know there's a price to pay.